Welcome to the Road to Empire podcast. Weekly content to help you develop and grow your well-being, mindset, business, and be inspired to reach the next level. Join us on this incredible journey of discovery, starring British entrepreneur and coach, Maj Hussein, and guests. Be prepared to be amazed.
Hey guys, Maj Hussein here. Road to Empire podcast episode 48. Hope you're well and in good health. Now, I started doing this podcast sometime last year, so we're pretty much flying through the episodes right now. And the aim was to try to help people learn more about entrepreneurship, economy, maybe a little bit of motivation, inspiration, help them kickstart their journey of whether they start something maybe on the side as part of the full-time work that they might be doing, or maybe something that they might look to go into full-time at some stage. Now, this week I really wanted to pre-record this podcast because by the time it's released on my YouTube channel, I'll probably be in Istanbul in Turkey on an international project doing some work out there. So hopefully the weather will be a lot better than it has been here in the UK. Pretty much been a washout over the last few weeks. So this week I really wanted to touch upon the topic of the immigrant mindset, the idea of how people move from one location, a geographical location, to another geographical location. And when they arrive in a new country, maybe they come there because they've come from a war-torn place or there's poverty there or whatever it might be. And they turn up into a new country, new surroundings, new environment, new context. Sometimes maybe they don't know anybody whatsoever and pretty much they're alone and they're starting their journey right from scratch. Now, a lot of these people that have the immigrant mindset, they tend to really go for it and go all out. And many of them succeed. And some of these people have become household names around the globe. And I wanted to touch upon one example, which was Big Arnie. A lot of you probably have heard of the famous Hollywood actor and then later politician called Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, his story is well documented and he's probably one of the best known and loved Hollywood actors out there in terms of contemporary times. And he was born in a small village in Austria near Germany, and he migrated to the United States of America. And obviously he turned up there. He had a strong Austrian accent and, he started off from scratch. In the early days, he was, sleeping on sofas of his friends' houses. And, he was even working as a builder on contracting sites and doing construction work just to kind of support him, as he was trying to survive out there in the States. And later on, he started getting involved in bodybuilding. He won the title of Mr. Olympia multiple times, at least 6 times or maybe even more. And then he eventually got his break into acting. And I remember growing up some of the famous movies, Conan the Barbarian, the classic Terminator, Commando, the movie he did with Danny DeVito, the twins. He did a variety of movies that were, famed throughout Hollywood that gave him a fantastic status. And I felt he even took lessons for his accent because he had a very strong accent. And he took lessons to, help him learn better American English accent. So his story is quite amazing, and not everything's perfect, but there are a lot of inspirational moments because at the same time, when he was building his profile, he was selling weights, dumbbells, and he was delivering them via post to clients. And a lot of people don't know, but, he holds a large portfolio of real estate. And I think he became a millionaire before he was 30 or something. So, he got involved in real estate and property. maybe because he was already working in construction or whatever it was. But, he already had his eyes set on real estate, which was a really cool kind of investment in terms of assets and strong investment that one could have. And as you know today, he's a successful immigrant story. So the idea of this immigrant kind of mindset that people have is, a lot of the time immigrants are associated as having, strong commitment, strong composure, willing to work, willing to do jobs that others are not willing to do. I've seen it myself. So my granddad moved here from the Indian subcontinent in the early 60s. And he was an actual soldier in the British Indian Army during World War II. He was stationed in Burma, in Asia, and he was in the Burmese jungles as an engineer and a soldier. And after the Second World War, the UK, Britain, had lost a lot of its men, and it had been bombed under the Blitzkrieg, as some of you might know if you did history in school or in college or whatever it might be. So the infrastructure here had been damaged, and Britain required people to come and work. So when it came to recruiting people, Britain turned to its colonial empire and some of the Commonwealth countries, for example, India, and then later on Pakistan, and then after that other places too. So you had the Windrush generation from the Caribbean, from countries like Jamaica. So you had a lot of immigrants coming up from the Commonwealth and moving to the United Kingdom, looking for work, looking for opportunities, a better life, and just to see how things were. And when they came here, a lot of the people from the Indian subcontinent, quite a fair few of them went to places like Yorkshire, Lancashire, or the West Midlands, because there were a lot of steel factories, and there were also cotton mills where there were jobs. And, I remember some of the elders, when they tell the old stories, they talk about how you could basically get a job on the same day you're looking for one. And if you actually left it, you could probably walk into another job on the same day, because jobs were plentiful and there was industry. And, a lot of exporting, importing with these type of products. So the textile mills and factories, and if you go to parts of Yorkshire and Lancashire, you can still see remnants of those kind of like factories. A lot of those factories have either been demolished or have been converted into other kinds of facilities now, but there is history and heritage there. Now, when my granddad came over, he was working in factories in Yorkshire, and then later on he moved into Lancashire, and, he worked really hard. I remember my dad telling me stories when he'd walk up to, at one stage he was working in a bakery, and he'd walk every day a few miles, and they'll be doing long kind of shifts, like 18-hour shifts, and other elder community members that would be doing, like they were famed for doing maybe 2 or 3 shifts in a row, like 48 hours or whatever it might be. They were solid workers, and they had the proper immigrant mindset. But their idea was that they'd come here, they'd work a little bit, and then maybe they'll send a bit of money back home. Then after a few years, they'd probably leave and go back to their native countries. But lo and behold, a lot of that generation, the first generation as they dub it, came over and they started working. And then later on, some of them brought their wives over, or whatever it was, their children. And eventually the children started to go to school in this country, in the UK and other places, similar kind of stories. And then basically they settled. And lo and behold, you've got people like me who are third generation, and now we've even got fourth generation and beyond. And we've got settled communities over the last 7 decades, although Muslim communities have been in England, for example, for the last 4 centuries, going all the way back to Elizabeth I. So this idea of the immigrant mindset, you could clearly be seen that generation that first came here, they would work in these type of facilities, and they'd graft, and they'd do what they had to do, because they knew they had to survive in the locality that they were in and where they were living. They'd have to pay rent, and the way they'd kind of like go around that was like they'd have like maybe 20 guys living in one house, and maybe 10 of them would go and work out during the day whilst 10 of them slept. And then when those 10 that were doing the day shift came back, the other 10 would come in and switch over. So they'd go to sleep whilst the other 10 went and did night shift. Now you can see how hard that they worked, because they knew they'd have to pay for their upkeep where they were, and they'd have to potentially send money back to support their spouses or extended family members in their villages. Now, this kind of immigrant mindset, I've seen it myself. Some people immigrants that I've met in recent times, again, a lot of them have to do similar things like that, supporting themselves here. And as you know, contemporary living in Western societies, a lot of it's around paying bills and trying to survive, and expenses and costs are quite high. So, a lot of them come here with a focus that they have to work, they have to provide for their families in their native villages. Now, I've seen, for example, I know guys that have come here, they might have got married to a spouse here, and they've started by working in a factory or a food kind of establishment, takeaway restaurant. They might have done a couple of years, and then from there, they've gone on to do self-employed work, whether that's construction work as builders or private hire cab drivers. And then, a lot of them then within a few years, maybe 2-5 years or whatever it is, they go and set up their own businesses. And maybe they're running a restaurant in the food industry. Maybe they've got a product or a service, or, they actually set up a business. Now, if you set up a business, you've got a lot more chances of succeeding rather than working for somebody else and making their dreams come true. You can work for yourself and make your dreams come true. So you can see that those who have the immigrant mindset, a lot of them are more likely to get hired because people know that they're willing to work harder, maybe longer hours, and stay focused. So my kind of advice is you can take lessons and you can learn a lot of things from this kind of idea of this immigrant mindset, and you can implement that in your lifestyle and how you're working towards your goals and aspirations. And if you've got this kind of mindset and focus, you can use it really to establish yourself. So even if you're working for somebody else in an office environment or whatever it might be, maybe you might come in half an hour early, start doing things early, and maybe you might stay behind half an hour at the end of the day. For example, I used to work in a bank some years ago, and I remember there was a lady that came over from Eastern Europe, and she was a really, really hard worker, and she had that immigrant mentality, and she was a friend of mine. And when she started working, she'd come in after she got used to the role and how it worked, the financial banking regulations and institution. She started coming in an hour early, doing overtime. She'd do overtime during her lunch break, and then she'd do a few hours overtime afterwards as well. And she'd even come in on the weekends and do overtime on the weekends as well. So some weeks she'd work 7 days, some weeks she'd work 6, because she had that immigrant mindset, which is what we've just been talking about for the last 10 minutes or so. So, these examples I'm trying to give you because you can implement that in your working life right now, whether you're working for somebody else in a place of work or whatever it might be, or whether you're just setting up yourself as self-employed, or whether you've just opened up your business and you really want to, go out there and push, because people know that, setting up a business is not easy. All this fanciful lifestyle that you might see on the internet, a lot of it behind the scenes they don't show, which is a graft and the grind. Sometimes I might be working 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day, 14. You have to work the long hours, maybe 70-hour weeks or more. People like Elon Musk work at least 90 hours or more in a week. And you have to put that grind and effort in, at least for the first few years, maybe 2 to 5 years, or maybe even longer, for some people a decade, before your business starts to pick up. You start to win more clients, customers, contracts, depending on what you're doing, and you're building your brand over time. So what I would say is home in on that immigrant mindset. Use those lessons that I've talked about today. And a lot of you will probably know people like that, and you can learn from them, speak to them, find out what their motivations are, and implement that in your working strategy. And, if you are going to do something over time, over the next year or the next 6 months or 2 months or whatever it might be, if you're going to set up your own side business, become an entrepreneur, or do something part-time, use and implement those strategies. Look at case studies, look at people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who we talked about earlier on in this podcast, and learn the lessons that, these people did and how they worked. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to be willing to grind it out and put in the hours. You have to do that in order to succeed. So I hope you benefited from this podcast about the immigrant mindset. So it's free content. So what would help me is if you rate my podcast, and if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, and I hope to speak to you soon. Take care.